What's up guys, my name is Ignas, welcome back to the channel. Last time with the portfolio update, we found out that the portfolio lacks exposure in information technology sector. Currently there is $117.08 allocated to it, which is 18.98% of the portfolio, though the target is set 1% higher at exactly 20%. So with next month's cash addition, I would be interested putting that money into work with one of the IT stocks that is already in the portfolio. So currently there are 6 names available: Intel, Microsoft, ASML, FIS, Qualcomm and Accenture. So my idea is either to go Microsoft or pick one of the names that I haven't yet added a lot of money into, and these two are Qualcomm and Accenture. So the 3 picks are set, and today we're doing a dividend stock comparison to determine which one of these 3 names should be picked for adding new money into next month. To make this dividend comparison possible, I've picked 8 different metrics, which we will compare between these 3 ticker symbols and check which name has the best metrics. For the comparison, we'll check into revenue, price to earnings ratio, shares outstanding, dividend yield, dividend payout ratio, years of consecutive dividend increases, 5-year compound annual dividend growth rate, and the current dividend yield compared to its 5-year average. So the stock with the best metric will get 3 points, second 2 and third 1. Then we'll sum the results up, and the stock with the most points will be considered the winner of this dividend comparison, which will also be the pick that we'll be adding new money into when the next month's deposit will be available. I hope that the rules for the comparison are clear, and a little thumbs up would be appreciated, and with that out of the way, let's start. So for the first part, we're taking a look into revenue. Here's Microsoft's revenue history over the last 5 years, and we're trying to find quarters where the company saw negative quarterly growth year over year. Though with Microsoft it seems not possible. Back in 2019 and 2020, they saw over 12% of quarterly growth. Then 2021 was the best, with 3 quarters over 20, and there was this slump by the end of 2022, where they saw $52.75 billion in revenue for the quarter, which was only an increase of 1.97% year over year. But afterwards growth accelerated again, and in the most recent quarter, to be exact $65.59 billion of it, there is an increase of 16.04%. So over the last 5 years, Microsoft hasn't seen even one negative quarter. Now let's take a look into Qualcomm's revenue, and this is already different. So a quarter in 2019 minus 16.7%, and the worst one in 5 years was in summer of 2020, down 49.22%. Afterwards we did see 2 years of growth, in 2022 going over $10 billion on the quarter, a double-digit growth, but then 2023 again decreases, minus 22 and minus 24% on the quarters, also going under $10 billion, though in the last year there has been again increases. The most recent quarter is over $10 billion, an increase of 18.7% to what we saw a year before. So we can now find 6 negative quarters over the last 5 years. And lastly we have Accenture. So similar to Qualcomm, there were 2 negative quarters in 2020. Then we saw substantial growth, over 20% around quarters in 2021 and 2022, though it slowed somewhere in 2023 with 3 to 4% growth, and then 2 negative quarters in 2024, though both under 1%, and the most recent quarter is again the positive, plus 2.63%, summing at $16.4 billion. So only 4 negative quarters over the last 5 years. Now the second metric we are taking a look into is price to earnings. I'm interested in how this ratio looks over the last 5 years. So we now have history for Microsoft. The lowest we have seen it was around 25. That was back in 2019. Then 2 years of it going at around 30. Though in the middle of 2022, there was this bottoming of the stock price. And also we saw a P/E ratio at 24.6, though afterwards it has been steadily going up, and with the most recent quarter in, the P/E ratio is at 37.12. So it looks to be quite expensive compared to what we have seen over the last 5 years. Now Qualcomm. and this is more of a sideways trajectory. So in 2019 it was at 18.88, and then in 2022 we saw a peak of the P ratio at 34.99. Then afterwards it was consistently moving downwards, and in 2022 we had it even under 10, though through 2023 and some part of 2024 it has again moved up closer to 30, but with the most recent quarter the P ratio is at 17.64. So way closer to what we have seen over the last 5 years. Now the last one is Accenture. So in 2020 we saw the P dropping to 21.96, then it took a year and a half to peak. By the end of 2021 it was over 35, then we saw it going lower in 2022, and 2022 was another bottom at 23.79. Though 2024 was again moving higher, over 30 at 33, and it is a similar story with the most recent quarter in, again over 30 at 31.48. So definitely not the best and closer to peaks over the last 5 years. Now the third metric is the number of shares outstanding. So for Microsoft, for 4 years the trend was downwards. They went from 7.7 billion shares out in 2019 to 7.49 billion in 2022, but afterwards this decreasing stopped. And actually in 2024, the number of shares was 7.47 billion, which is 0.11% higher for the quarter year over year. So with the most recent quarter in, we have the number of shares out at 7.47 billion, which is 240 million less than we saw 5 years ago, a decrease in the shares out of 3.1%. Now let's take Qualcomm. So in 2019, the number of shares out was 1.22 billion. And that was the last time they have substantially decreased it, minus 16.61% on the quarter year over year. But then in the last 5 years it pretty much went nowhere, actually increasing a bit on a few quarters. And then with the most recent quarter in, the number of shares out is at 1.13 billion. So in the last 5 years Qualcomm has decreased the number of shares out by 90 million, which is actually not that bad of a decrease, minus 7.4%. And third one is Accenture. I think this is the graph that we would like to see. So in 2019 the number of shares out was at 650 million. Then over the last 5 years they have consistently decreased on the number of shares. And with the most recent quarter in, it is at 636 million. So in 5 years Accenture decreased the number of shares out by 14 million, which is in turn a decrease of 2.2%. Which I now see is the worst one out of these three that we have just checked. Now starting with the fourth metric, we will go deeper into dividends, and the first one is the dividend yield. So Microsoft is paying an annual dividend of $3.32 per share, which at a share price of $447.27, that is a dividend yield of 0.74%. Now Qualcomm, it also pays a similar dividend of $3.40, but at a share price of $158.53, this is here a dividend yield of 2.14%. And then we have Accenture, a dividend of $5.92 per share, so at a price of $358.68, that is a dividend yield of 1.65%. Now next metric is the dividend payout ratio, so what percentage of company's earnings are assigned to pay dividends. For Microsoft, the dividend payout ratio is at 25.34%. Now taking Qualcomm, the payout ratio is a bit higher at 30.27%. And then Accenture, with the highest payout ratio at 46.28%. Now next step are years of dividend increases. So for how many years in a row the company has been increasing dividends. Interestingly for Microsoft it only says 1 year. Now switching to Qualcomm, they do show consistency, with 22 years of consecutive dividend increases. And then Accenture, so just under Qualcomm's result, here with 20 years of consecutive dividend increases. Now metric number 7 is the compound annual dividend growth. We're taking the 5-year result including the next year's estimate. So for Microsoft the compound annual dividend growth is at 14.7%. Now Qualcomm, and its dividend growth is slower. The 5-year is at 5.76%. And lastly Accenture, closer to Microsoft's result, with 12.54% on the dividend growth. Now for the last metric, we are taking a look into the current dividend yield and comparing it to its 5-year average. For that, we are using my dividend investing watchlist on Google Sheets. So currently Microsoft is trading at a dividend yield of 0.74%, and on average in the last 5 years we've seen it at 0.82%. Now the worst dividend yield to get into the stock was back in 2021 with 0.66%, below the 5-year average for 19.78%, and the best time to get in was in 2022 with a yield of 1.5%, higher than the 5-year average plus 27.62%. Though we are thinking of getting into the stock right now, but it is currently lower than the 5-year average, minus 10.32%. Now let's take Qualcomm. So in 2022 we saw the stock trading at a dividend yield of exactly 3%, higher than the 5-year average for 39.44%, and the worst timing was in 2021 with 1.54%, below average for 28.42%. It was similar in the second quarter of 2024 with a yield of 1.58%, and now with 2.25% in dividends, we do have it higher than the 5-year average, plus 4.67%. Though there is still Accenture, the worst time to get into the stock was in 2022 at 0.98%, below the 5-year average for 29.51%, and the best timing was just recently in 2024 with a yield of 1.72%, higher than the 5-year average plus 23.72%. Though the current yield is also not too bad, 1.59%, also higher than average plus 14.71%. So we have the numbers for our comparison, and it seems Accenture will be taking it at least for this last metric. Now we have checked through the 8 metrics, and in the meantime I also added the results into this table. Now we can start assigning points. So the first metric, most negative quarters, goes to Microsoft, with 0 negative quarters over the last 5 years. For the second metric we are giving it to Qualcomm, where its P/E ratio is at 17.64, about average to what we have seen from it over the last 5 years. Shares outstanding goes to Qualcomm again, where in 5 years they have decreased the number of shares out by 7.4%. Dividend yield also Qualcomm, where the stock is now trading at a yield of 2.14%. Dividend payout ratio goes to Microsoft. They are assigning only 25.34% of their revenue for dividends. 3 points to Qualcomm for 22 years of consecutive dividend increases. 5-year compound annual dividend growth rate goes to Microsoft with 14.7%. And dividend yield compared to its 5-year average goes to Accenture with 14.71%. So the points are assigned. Microsoft and Accenture share 15 each, but there is a small lead from Qualcomm with 18 points. It got 4 best metrics out of 8. So with 18 points, Qualcomm is considered the winner of this dividend comparison. And in turn this will likely be the name that I'm increasing the position in with the next month's cash addition to the dividend portfolio. What do you think? Is Qualcomm worth buying into at current levels? Share your thoughts or a better pick in a comment below. Also don't forget to support the channel and leave a thumbs up under the video. Last time I've compared the dividend paying names from the healthcare sector, so if you are interested in that, then click on a video that is currently on the screen. And that was it from my side, thank you for watching and I'll see you all in the next one.
Dividend.